Season 3 is out, and after bending to the Nintendo overlords, we have both Elena and the patch for the next season of Street Fighter 6. And unfortunately, this patch is a massive letdown. Not only in the sense that it did not do nearly enough to shake up the play patterns by ignoring certain universal mechanics, but in the changes that they chose to make. I can only speculate that they saw the Tekken patch come out and the response that they got, so they decided to not make any drastic changes, which is why we got what we got. But the patch is out, and all we can do is wait for the next one. So let's go over the patch and why it was not so good, focusing on one specific change they decided to make. Quickly going through character balance, I have no earthly idea why they decided to make Ryu, a character who already had very strong tournament results, a character that is arguably top 5, significantly stronger. I do get making a popular character strong, but at the same time you're dropping millions on prize money for competitive players. Again, whatever. In terms of how the character balance changes can be judged, it's a bit soon, so take this with a grain of salt, but it's most likely a net positive. Personally, I'm still a bit skeptical because this character is scaring me, but I can see the other changes being enough of a net positive. But enough about that, now we can go over the universal changes. The first big change involves throw teching. Skill loops are something that the community is quite vocal about, and this was a way to tone them down. Now when you successfully tech a throw, you get a whole bar of drive back, and some super. This is an attempt to relieve pressure on defense while dissuading players on offense from throwing. I don't think this does very much. At the end of the day, the successful throw still puts you in a scenario where you have to worry about another throw. The scenario on success hasn't changed, which was the core reason for the complaint. While this does make defense better, it doesn't improve it by much. Shimmy is still much too scary. So finally, we get to the most impactful universal change. No, I'm not going to talk about sweeps. Perfect Parry is now a shell of its former self. It still has very specific uses, but it no longer is the game-defining universal mechanic it once was, and in isolation, this is a good change. This is a change that needed to happen within the lifespan of the game. Previously, Parry was able to get you the screen freeze whenever you hit the small window. Now you need to be blocking the correct direction too, otherwise you get a separate noise and get a bit more drive gauge instead of the guaranteed punish. Mids, overheads need to be parried with a back input, and lows need to be parried with a down back. So how does this change translate into its application? This change makes it much harder to fish for a perfect parry in neutral, landing you a free hit just by tapping parry. Now you can't just get the timing right, you also have to be correct on high-low. This will probably make this tactic obsolete, the odds of success have just been cut in half, and it wasn't good once it got nerfed in Season 1. And the more applicable change, Wake Up Perfect Parry is effectively dead. Not only do you have to hope that they strike, instead of throwing you or shimmying you, you also have to guess right on stand parry or crouch parry. And because every character can jail lights for their strike, being able to mix between low and mid with no downside, Wake Up Perfect Parry just doesn't seem good enough anymore. And these appear to be good results. No more tap parry in neutral means less volatility in the neutral, which I agree with. And Wake Up Perfect Parry being considerably less consistent means that Perfect Parry and Wake Up is no longer viable, which in turn means the strike can be reintroduced to offense. We don't need exclusively throw shimmy, now we can do strike throw shimmy. The first change is self-explanatory, so I'm gonna get into why Wake Up Perfect Parry was not healthy for the game, or at least too unhealthy to keep in. The point of this change was to reduce volatility. And what do I mean by this? Volatility is the opportunity for the player on defense to take the advantage. Offense and defense in Street Fighter is built on the concept that the player on offense has a massive advantage, and theoretically should be keeping the advantage while the player on defense needs to fight their way out of a bad situation. Even something as traditional as an invincible reversal does add volatility to the game. A lack of an invincible reversal is a bane. It makes a character's defense worse, and it's an active tool in order to design and balance characters. Worse defense for you means better offense for the opponent. But parry is different than invincible reversals. While reversals beat both strike and throw, parries beat strikes and lose to throws. So even though parry costs less resources, it also works on fewer options, meaning it's less versatile, making it worse in this regard. But it's not the costs that make one okay and the other not okay. It's the way the risk-reward is skewed. If an invincible reversal is blocked, you eat half your health, and 3 bars of drive. This is a slight exaggeration, but I think you get the idea. But if your parry fails, you take the equivalent of 2 throws and lose a bar and a half. The perfect parry on Wake Up is much less risky to mess up than the reversal. That's if they fail, and if they succeed, the reward is also different. A reversal gets you a chunk of damage and a reset to neutral. You got them off of you.
Oh, get off me!
But a successful perfect parry gets you less damage, side switch, and the opportunity to push your own offense. These two options both add volatility. They both make defense stronger, but I don't think that anyone is campaigning to remove invincible reversals. They both add volatility, but I'd like to make a clarifying argument here. One adds good volatility, and the other adds bad volatility. Volatility isn't inherently bad. While it may mean the better player wins less, it makes the game infinitely more interesting. Street Fighter would be a lot less fun if it was just whoever won neutral first won the round. Comeback factors make the game more interesting, they just have to make sense and not feel awful to play against. I want to make the case that invincible reversals add good volatility. Even though the option existing makes defense stronger, therefore directly making offense weaker, the risk reward is distributed in a way where it still favors the offense. You may get them off of you, but if you don't, you explode. Players on offense want you to reversal, so they can punish it and explode your health bar. Even though the option itself goes against the offense advantage, defense disadvantage, in practice it ends up offering deep counterplay while favoring the offense, which is why I consider it good volatility. Wake Up Perfect Parry is what I would consider bad volatility. The option in concept should be the same as a reversal, but in practice ends up favoring the player on defense over the player on offense, violating the concept that advantage states are built on. Yes, there is a higher risk in using it, it loses to both throw and shimmy, but the punish is significantly better, and so is the reward. You not only get to hit them, but you get to take your turn. And for what? A bar and a half of drive and functionally guessing wrong an additional time? Wake Up Perfect Parry is an example of bad volatility, because the risk reward is favored for the defender. It's too rewarding for too little risk. Simple as that. After that whole spiel, we can return to the balance patch changes. Capcom did a good job in effectively removing it, right? On paper it seems like a no-brainer, but if you take a look at the way the game ends up being played, it's not so simple anymore. When the game launched, players figured out that Perfect Parry was really strong on defense, and it certainly helped that it was a universal option. So even though the offense in this game was strong, there was still a strong defensive option in order to counter it. And what did the players do? They adapted. Perfect Parry was too threatening, so players started favoring the throw more. And it certainly helps that the throw gives enough advantage to where you can threaten another one. A throw loop, as you will. A skill loop, even. And so, offense in the game boiled down to throw versus shimmy. This doesn't mean players didn't strike, but the primary two threats of offense were these two. And once that developed, the game went through one more step. With throws being prevalent, it now made sense for you to go for the riskier backdash. Sure, it lost to strikes, but if you manage to catch a throw, you can potentially get your turn back. And the same with the jump. Anti-throw, weak to strikes, but gains space in the form of getting out of the corner. The meta evolved and adapted around the Perfect Parry and the skill loop. Mostly around skill loop. Perfect Parry actually fell off in usage because of how overwhelming the skill loop is. But backdash was only as prevalent as it was because Perfect Parry is so scary. And now with this patch, there isn't a reason to fear the Perfect Parry anymore. Any player can alternate their jailing light strikes between crouching light kick and crouching light punch with no downsides, which means strikes are back on the table, which means there's too much risk involved in backdashes and jumps. Depth of defense was inadvertently removed, which I think makes the game less interesting. Offense is no longer just throw shimmy. It's returned to strike throw shimmy, making offense stronger in a game that already has strong offense. Sure, damage was lowered across the board, with a few obvious exceptions, but that in no way makes up for how much stronger offense gets because of their new access to this option. And yes, strong thing gets even stronger, which is bad, but I don't think that's the worst aspect of this change. While they reintroduced strikes into the game, skill loops still remained. The reason for their inclusion in the first place, Wake Up Perfect Parry, is gone, but they linger nonetheless. And the problem with this is that strike and throw end up essentially being the same option with the same risk reward. Both do almost the same amount of damage, assuming you don't dump meter in a light scaled combo, and both put you in the same scenario after they're successful. There isn't enough of a meaningful difference between the two to make the choice between them matter. It gets to a point where in practice, this becomes a true 50-50. Same risk, same reward, but the player on defense needs to guess between the two. This is supremely uninteresting. The depth in offense comes with managing the inherent risk reward of your options, analyzing which option is better in specific scenarios, and combining that with a read on your opponent to get the right read. Even if the odds were 40-60, it still allows this analysis to occur. If it's a true 50-50, it just becomes a hard read off of your opponent, which is, like I said, much less interesting. It leads to better offense, but without any depth. And of course, we still have skill loops. That's enough doom and gloom for now. I can understand why Capcom is hesitant to go through with big changes, just like at Tekken. So it isn't the biggest leap to assume that skill loops are leaving in the near future. Still a leap, but they've gotten rid of the thing they were here to stop. Do I have confidence that they'll do this? A bit. But until then, we're playing a game with defense in the worst state it's yet been in, and that's ignoring the lack of attention to these universal mechanics, and how this still eats your input. I'm back to rambling again, so I'll just end off with this. This was a very disappointing patch.